At midnight, the clock showed 2:47 a.m. Inside the presidential palace in Nairobi, William Ruto put down the pen in his hand and stood up. The documents in front of him would change the economic fate of Kenya, but would forever erase the country's independence. The IMF's final ultimatum lay on the table: to sign or to take the greatest risk in history. But this story began 72 hours earlier, Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the IMF's most skilled negotiator, landed at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. In her briefcase were documents that would change Kenya forever. Operation Reset, the mission to restructure Kenya. "This time will be different," she murmured to herself. She had worked with African countries for 15 years, but William Ruto was different. He wasn't as easily persuaded as other leaders. At the same time, at State House, William Ruto was in a meeting with Treasury Secretary Njuguna Ndungu. "Mr. President, our situation is critical," Ndungu said, showing him the figures. "Foreign debt is at $67 billion. Interest payments are consuming 60% of the budget. Without IMF support," Ruto raised his hand, "I know the cost in Njuguna, but I also know their terms." Thursday, 9 o'clock a.m. The first meeting. Dr. Mitchell stood across from Ruto in the Grand Hall of State House. On the table lay the 847-page agreement. "Mr. President," Mitchell said with a professional smile, "the IMF is offering Kenya a $50 billion support package. This would be the largest aid in your country's history." Ruto flipped through the document. He stopped on page 247. "Dr. Mitchell, it says here that 35% of Kenya's natural resources will be transferred to an international consortium. How does that help?" Mitchell's smile faded. "President Ruto, this is how the modern economy works. For transparency and efficiency, for colonialism," Ruto cut her off. "Don't dress it up with pretty words, Dr. Mitchell." That night, Ruto was alone with his advisor, David Kaibi. "William," said Kaibi, an old friend who could speak informally, "don't let emotions cloud you. This is about 48 million Kenyans. Without the agreement, the economy will collapse." Ruto looked out at Nairobi's lights through the window. "David, my father was a farmer on this land. The British once offered him help, too. He lost his land in the end." Friday, 11:30 a.m. The pressure mounts. The phone began ringing. First, it was German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. "President Ruto, Germany supports Kenya's decision. However, without an IMF agreement, we may have to reconsider our trade relations." Then French President Macron. "Mon ami Ruto, the France-Kenya friendship is invaluable, but rejecting this deal would be very risky." Lastly, an unexpected name: former US President Obama. "William, I've been closely following Kenya's development. This opportunity shouldn't be missed." With every call, Ruto looked increasingly weary. That evening, during dinner with his wife Rachel, he was silent. "What's wrong, William?" she asked. "Do they want me to sell Kenya or save it? I'm no longer sure." Saturday, 4:45 p.m. The secret document. Interior Minister Kithure Kindiki entered Ruto's office in urgency. He held a classified file. "Mr. President, these documents were leaked from MI6. Are you ready to read them?" The file was titled Project Colonization 2.0. Its contents were shocking. Once Kenya accepts the IMF deal, within 10 years, 40% of agricultural land will be transferred to foreign companies. Full control of mines will go to international consortiums. The education system will be restructured according to Western curricula. Swahili will be sidelined. National monetary policy will be under IMF control. Ruto read the document in silence. "Kindiki, is this real?" "Our sources rate it 95% reliable, Mr. President." Sunday, 8:30 a.m. The people move. A surprising scene unfolded in downtown Nairobi. Thousands of Kenyans had taken to the streets. Their placards read, "Ruto, don't sell Kenya. IMF eel modern slavery. Uhuru wa kweli, true freedom." Grace Wanjiku, a 67-year-old teacher, spoke into a microphone. "My children, we fought for the freedom of this land. Will we now accept economic chains?" Protests were broadcast live on TV. A CNN correspondent reported, "Some Kenyans oppose the IMF agreement, though economists say the country could default without it." Ruto watched the scenes on TV. His advisors were worried. "Mr. President," said Treasury Secretary Ndungu, "the people are emotional. Economic realities are different." "What if the people are right?" Ruto asked. Sunday night, 10:15 p.m. The final meeting. Dr. Mitchell returned to State House for the last time. She wasn't alone. The IMF executive director and EU delegation head were with her. "President Ruto," said Mitchell, dropping all diplomatic niceties, "you have until morning. Reject this deal, and there will be consequences." The EU official added, "Kenya's access to European markets will be revoked. Trade deals terminated." The IMF director was harsher. "International loans will freeze. Investors will withdraw. The shilling will collapse." Ruto looked calm. But storms raged within him. And what of Kenya's dignity? Its independence? What are they worth? "President Ruto," said Mitchell, "I understand your position, but you cannot make emotional decisions. You bear the responsibility of 48 million people." The meeting ended at 11:30 p.m. Ruto was alone. Midnight. The reckoning. At 12 o'clock a.m., Ruto began rereading the documents. Each page showed another piece of Kenya being sold. Page 156. Mombasa port operations to be transferred to international consortium for 99 years. Page 287. Tourism rights to Masai Mara Reserve assigned to foreign companies. Page 423. Education system to be restructured to IMF standards. Page 678. National budget to be annually approved by IMF. Each page meant Kenya becoming smaller. At 1:30 a.m., the phone rang. It was his father, Mzee Daniel Sherio. He was 89 and rarely called at night. "My son," the old man said, "I saw your grandfather in a dream. He said, 'We failed to protect our land. What will you do?'" Ruto's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, it's such a hard decision." "My son, easy choices don't make history. Hard ones do." After hanging up, Ruto pulled a photo from his drawer. His father as a young farmer, working the land, sweat on his brow. 2:30 a.m. The moment of decision. Ruto stood and walked to the window. Nairobi was quiet, but he could hear the breath of 48 million Kenyans. He returned to his desk. The IMF agreement still sat there, 847 pages, $50 billion, and Kenya's soul. He picked up his pen. Would he sign? Suddenly, a memory from childhood returned. His father once told him, "William, money is temporary, but honor is forever." He set the pen down. He opened his computer and began typing. "To the IMF Executive Board, on behalf of the Republic of Kenya, I hereby communicate our decision regarding your proposal." 2:47 a.m. A historic moment. This was the moment. 2:47 a.m. William Ruto put the pen down and stood up. The documents before him would have changed Kenya's economic fate, but at the cost of its independence. And Ruto had made his decision. 4:15 a.m. The aftermath. Ruto called Prime Minister Gachagua. "Rigathi, I rejected the IMF offer. Call a press conference for the morning." "William, this is madness. The economy will collapse." "Maybe, but Kenya will stand." At 6 o'clock a.m., the press conference began. Ruto stepped up to the podium as the world watched Kenya. "To the people of Kenya," Ruto said, voice firm. "Last night, I made a historic decision. I have rejected the IMF proposal." The room erupted. Reporters shouted over one another. "This was not an easy choice," Ruto continued. "But Kenya's dignity is not for sale. We will overcome economic challenges with our own resources." 3 months later, an unexpected outcome. Contrary to Western media predictions, Kenya did not collapse. Ruto's decision echoed across Africa. South Africa, Ghana, and Nigeria began reevaluating their IMF deals. China and Russia offered alternative financial packages. Turkey, India, and Brazil signed new trade agreements. Most importantly, the Kenyan people mobilized for economic recovery. The diaspora sent record remittances. Local investors stepped up. Dr. Sarah Mitchell resigned from the IMF. Her final report stated, "A new generation of African leaders has emerged. They no longer accept exploitation disguised as economic aid. The IMF must rethink its strategy." Epilogue, 1 year later. Ruto sat in his State House office. On his desk were Kenya's latest economic growth figures, 6.2%, one of the highest in Africa. The phone rang. It was Dr. Mitchell. "President Ruto, about the decision you made a year ago. I was wrong. Congratulations." Ruto smiled. "Dr. Mitchell, sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones." After hanging up, he looked at the framed photo on his desk. His father, Mzee Daniel, working the land. Below it was an inscription: "Money is temporary. Honor is forever." With his midnight decision, William Ruto didn't just change Kenya. He changed the future of Africa. History recorded it as the Nairobi moment, the triumph of a leader's conscience over economic coercion. And this story reminds every young African leader, real power lies in the courage to say no.